Hey, everybody. Thanks a lot, Ron. And great job, Victoria. It's really fun. We have these monthly meetings where the 40 departmental chief sustainability officers meet with the city's sustainability office. And we've developed a great kind of camaraderie and rapport across the whole group. And Victoria and I get to collaborate a couple times a month. It's super terrific. I'm going to blend a little bit of my personal story in with the work that we're doing, because some of the folks in here are kind of on their career journey in sustainability. A really interesting thing that happened for me, I had a first career in the entertainment business, and I made a political documentary in 2004. And then I went and got a master's in public policy at UCLA. And I got this leadership and sustainability certificate in addition to the master's in public policy while I was there. So I knew I wanted to do sustainability, and I got into city government. I started working for Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa in 2007. And I got to work on some green related things sometimes, but it wasn't till, 2015 when Mayor Garcetti put out that first sustainability plan for the city. A few months before, he released that Executive Directive 7 on sustainability. And typically in the city departments, we read the executive directives the day they came out, looking for what it is that we're being directed to do. And I remember seeing that each department was being directed to nominate someone as their chief sustainability officer, and it was going to be extra duties on top of whatever it is you're already doing. And I just had this eureka moment, I have to be the chief sustainability officer for StreetsLA. I had been kind of known for optimizing the pothole turnaround time, which is a very different thing than greening the world. That's asphalting the world. And I went into my boss's office, who was the director of the agency, that day that ED7 came out, and said, I'm your chief sustainability officer. And that has turned out to be sort of a maximum career inflection moment for me. Raising my hand for that role, an uncompensated additional role, has really changed the entire kind of trajectory of my career. So I encourage folks to raise your hand and say yes when interesting things arise and somebody needs to plug in and do them. I'm lucky enough now as an executive where I'm on the other end of that. I'm the number 2 at an agency with 1,200 people, and I'm always giving the work to the people who raise their hand for it, because I figure they want it more than somebody that I dump it on, So don't ever be shy about coming forward and saying, I'm really interested in this new thing. I want to help. So, at our agency, we're trying to take those many broad goals that Victoria described and figure out how to operationalize them into real things on the ground that are compatible with our mission. When I moved over from Mayor Villaraigosa's office to the Bureau of Street Services in late 2012, the only 2 metrics that the agency reported to the mayor's office monthly was the number of potholes filled and the number of miles of streets resurfaced. So our asphalt related activities were the only ones that were considered important enough to report in at the center of City Hall. Things have changed a lot. In 2019, right before the pandemic, there was this Verde Exchange conference that happens every year. And we did a charrette of 4 or 5 different city and county agencies talking about streets. And I was one of the participants. And they have this really cool new type of note-taking where an infographic is drawn as the conversation is taking place. And so this was the infographic that was made in the 2-hour conversation that we had. And I took a picture of it, and this is sort of my work life, in a picture, This is everything that I and 1,200 other people at StreetsLA are trying to do. So as you can see, it's gotten a lot more multifaceted than, paving the streets and fixing potholes. And in order to do these things and to make our city climate adaptive, to promote active transportation, to reduce air pollution and carbon emissions, we need to innovate in more directions than ever before and faster in each of those directions than ever. And that's something that I gradually sort of came to in the deep thinking we were all doing in the first year of the pandemic, when you have a lot of time on your hands working from home. And so my hypothesis was sort of like, if it's true that we have to innovate in more ways, in more directions faster than ever before, wouldn't it make sense to have a strategy on the innovation itself? Are we just thinking that a very risk-averse environment, public works, where we've been making the streets out of the same asphalt and concrete since World War II, and nobody likes to change anything because it's a liability risk-oriented field, right? People trip and fall, there's a car accident, nobody wants to introduce any new variables into the equation. Is that type of organization or family of bureaucracies going to innovate rapidly? Probably not. So we started talking within the agency about, could we actually have an innovation strategy? So what we did is we put together an innovation steering committee. We had made an interdisciplinary committee once before on urban cooling, the sort of nationally recognized work that we're doing and using cool pavement coatings and shade trees to reduce urban heat island in underserved communities. And we started to drive that work with like an interdisciplinary committee of people at different levels with different expertise in different divisions. And we found there was a lot of creativity going on that hadn't previously happened when people work up and down the chain of command in one silo. And so as we were thinking about innovation, we thought, well, the cool committee is such a success. What if we stand up an innovation steering committee? And we had people volunteer. Again, the whole thing about people raising their hand, who want to do this. And we put about 20 people in a room, and we asked everybody to bring like 1 to 3 innovation areas that we should be pursuing as an agency. And we put them all in a Google Doc, and we started grouping them, and they naturally kind of clustered into these 5 groups. And we just sort of named them provisionally just to like organize the Google Doc. We like had a column for the broad category. But in our second meeting and third meeting, we were like, maybe these are like innovation themes. Maybe this is actually a strategy. It isn't just the name of the collection, So we started working on better names for the categories that could actually connote a whole kind of innovation theme that's relevant to our streets agency. So these are the 5 that we've settled on. Digital everywhere, meaning every one of our staff has a mobile device or a laptop with universal connectivity and access to every document, piece of information, video, or set of plans that they might need for anything that they're doing. In the field, at home, in the office, wherever. And this is really a revolutionary idea for the sort of 1990s IT environment that we were in when I joined. It used to be that all the data, if it was not on paper, if it was digital, it was locked behind the city firewall and only accessible on a city PC on somebody's desk. And my agency is 2/3 field, 1/3 office. And some of the supervisors and superintendents also have an office, but the action is all in the field. So the data was all in the office and the action was in the field. That didn't make any sense. So that's an ongoing area that we're driving on very hard. Sustainable streetscape, that's what we do. We want to start changing the public right of way from a very wide street for vehicles and a little narrow sidewalk to a more complete street with opportunities for walking and biking, great opportunities to access transit. We want to have more trees in the public right of way. We want to start looking at stormwater. Does it really make sense in a desert to take all the rainwater and send it out to the ocean and mix it in with the salt water? Like, water is a very finite resource in the desert, but our public works infrastructure that was designed in the like 50s to 2000 is all about getting rid of the water as soon as we have it, instead of figuring out how to capture it, recycle it, and use it. Greening our yards. We have like 30 facilities, and if you visit one, it kind of feels like you're going back to that TV show called Taxi. It's like you're instantly in the 1970s in our yards. They need a lot of updating And much of the updating that's needed involves, improved energy usage, reduced water usage, EV charging, all these different things. Path to zero emissions fleet is something I'm personally leaning into very hard. We have more than 1,000 vehicles. We have almost as many vehicles as people in this agency. When there's like a rainstorm and a tree's blocking the road, we're the people who come and remove it. And, on Memorial Day weekend at midnight on a Saturday night, you're not going to be able to rent a piece of equipment. If you don't have it, it's not going to be available. So we do have more pieces than we might use every day because we have to be ready for any possible thing 24/7, 365. And we have a very mixed collection of vehicles: light vehicles, medium duty, heavy duty, vocational vehicles, off-road construction vehicles. If you gave me $1 billion today, I couldn't rebuy all of our fleet in EVs because most of them don't exist yet. So we came up with this idea that we have to blaze the path to zero emissions fleet. And as an agency, we've decided we want to be a leader in the city family and in public works organizations around California in blazing that trail for other people to follow, rather than just like waiting for general services to buy us some EVs. And the last one is circular economy. It's kind of recycling on steroids. It's looking upstream. Well, the product that we're using, asphalt or concrete or something else, where did it come from? What are the upstream carbon emissions and air pollutions and resource impacts of how it's produced? And then what happens to it at the end of life? We've been very good about recycling old asphalt that we peel off when we grind and pave a street, and we throw that into the mix. We're producing 50% recycled content asphalt now. When we fix an old sidewalk, we bring the old sidewalk that we removed to a rubble crusher, and we turn it into like crushed miscellaneous base, little pieces. And then we use that for other projects. So we've been good at recycling. We haven't been that good at looking at what happened to the point where we get the product. And that's something we're working very hard on. So I want to show you some examples of how we're going after these 5 themes. And the way we did it is we light up the ones that it relates to on the left. And a really interesting thing we didn't know that was going to happen is there are initiatives that drive multiple themes. They're not actually mutually exclusive buckets. So we can have things we come up with that involve several of those goals. So my agency maintains 700,000 street trees along sidewalks and parkways. And we had one inventory of it done in the 90s before there was GIS. So we didn't have like a latitude and longitude on those trees. We didn't have an exact position on those trees. And again, it was locked into the city PC behind the city firewall. So we're in the middle of a multi-year project now to have contracted arborists visit every single street tree in the city. And what's really cool is there's a public-facing map showing this data. And if you check today, you can see the trees that were put in yesterday. Like, it's updated nightly. So we've already cataloged about 3/4 of the 700,000 trees. We know the species, the health, the size. And it's all in this asset management system called Davy Treekeeper 8, which now every time we respond to like a tree emergency, we can log what we did to the tree. Each tree has a maintenance record. So if I might notice, gosh, there's a limb down at 111 Main. Well, we had a limb down there 3 months ago. Maybe this tree is dropping limbs. Maybe we need to look at it more carefully than just take away the next limb. Also, all of our proactive tree trimming is put together in Davy. You can like draw a box around a region, get a list of all those trees, make a work order to trim those trees, send that to one of our field staff. And we interact with it all in the field on electronic devices. One of the very interesting findings, 30% of the available locations are vacant. So right now, there are about 300,000 permittable street tree planting locations without making a single concrete cut. We didn't know that. And we know exactly where they are. There are 99 neighborhood councils in LA. We can work with a neighborhood council and show them a map of where all the vacant sites are, and they could say to us where they think the most important places might be. They can raise outside money to do a tree planting beyond what the city can do. So this is going to be a really amazing resource, not just for us, but for the residents, so that we'll all know, how we're doing in managing this incredible resource. So once we started keeping a maintenance log of the street trees, it kind of inspired us to want to go bigger. And we're currently deploying a very complex product called Cartograph, which is like a master asset management database for our entire bureau. So everything we maintain, the sidewalk, the road surface, the curb ramps, all these assets are going into this database. And then whenever we want to inspect something out in the field, we're going to do it on a tablet and put that information in the database so that everybody instantly within the organization can see it and act upon it. For example, our resurfacing program last year did 500 lane miles. That's a lot of city blocks. And we were inspecting them on paper. So there's a folder somewhere. John Smith inspected, the 200 block of Pear Street, and he found it in this condition, and he made these notes. Well, anybody who wants to see that has to find this folder. Well, now it's going to be all in Cartograph, and everyone in the whole organization can get to this information anytime. So that's going to be a really big game changer for us. Circular economy, we hired an environmental specialist to help us with environmental scientist to help us with some of these issues. She figured out that we use 1.25 million gallon equivalents of fossil fuels a year. One city agency, 1.25 million. We say gallon equivalents because we have a lot of compressed natural gas vehicles. And like I said earlier, I can't change that en masse immediately. But something that Susan, our environmental scientist, taught me that I didn't know is if you start to look upstream, there's a calculation called well to wheel, meaning the oil well all the way to your tailpipe in the vehicle. And when you think about well to wheel emissions, that captures all the methane that comes out from drilling for oil, all the methane that comes out from extracting that oil and refining that oil, or extracting that natural gas and transporting it in a pipeline. If you use drop-in renewable fuels, you can reduce your well-to-wheel carbon emissions by 55%. And these fuels are cost competitive today in California because of California policy incentives. It's actually a winner financially, even before the environmental benefits. So after Susan told me this, this was the summer of 2020, we went to General Services and said, we want to buy some renewable diesel. And they said, we actually have a pilot for that, but none of the other agencies said they wanted it. So, we have these large road construction machines that they don't go to the gas station. We bring the gas to them. It's like a $500,000 giant machine. So we operate a couple of diesel trucks where we bring fueling trucks out to the field. So we started fueling the fueling truck with renewable diesel. And we tested it for a few months and it worked really great. We got General Services to buy diesel for the entire city as renewable last September. So we're just coming up on a year of the entire city's fuel purchases being renewable diesel. And this is where sometimes you can lean in as an innovator, capture some learnings, share out what you're doing, and then maybe make a step change to scale. And that's kind of what I aspire to do as a chief sustainability officer. Get people excited, start small, and then see if you can sometimes go really big. This is much bigger than my fuel consumption at StreetsLA, right? The whole city is running on renewable diesel and renewable compressed natural gas now. So we also are doing some cool things with electric vehicles. In the upper left, we just bought 2 solar-powered charging canopies. And it's a company called Beam. There's a battery underneath that canopy that's about the same size battery as an electric car. So you let it collect solar energy during the day. And at the end of shift, you bring 1 or 2 EVs, park them underneath, plug them in, and you're getting 0 carbon electrons. There's no fossil fuels in that, electron stream, right? And I can put one of these in one of my yards that doesn't have enough incoming power to power a charger, or where I don't have the time, it might take me a year to get wired chargers like designed, permitted, installed. If eventually, like New York City has 80 of these beams. We just bought our first 2. But they are transportable, like the company will move them for you. So like I could pick a yard in the West Valley, deploy some EVs from there, start a level 2 charger wired project. When those chargers come in, then I can pick up the beams and move them to the next remote outpost. And that'll help me in the case of like an emergency where there's a power outage, I can still power my EVs. There's also a power panel on there where you can plug in other stuff. So you can like power radios in a power outage off the beam. We made the market for a hybrid electric motor sweeper. The manufacturer didn't make that. We demanded that, and we got the first 2 that were ever made. Now they're marketing them all around the country. This sweeper uses the battery from a BMW i3 to power the cleaning functions. And then it still transports itself using CNG. That's a 25 to 30% fuel savings just by electrifying the cleaning functions. That's a lot of reduced carbon emissions and air pollution. We are cleaning the downtown protected bike lanes with this beautiful little mini sweeper that's all electric. It's an Italian model. We call it Verde. And we think like zero emissions cleaning of zero emissions transportation is a cool sort of overlay. And then recently we inspected the pavement condition of the entire 1,100-mile on-street bike lane network with these 4 electric mopeds shown over there. That's the mayor and one of the council members trying them out last month. It was the first time that the pavement condition of the bike lane network was inspected on 2 wheels. Previously, we were doing, windshield inspections from a pickup truck, which is not the same thing as actually riding the bike lane. So that's the first time any city agency has made a bike ride along all the bike lanes, and those electric mopeds are zero emissions. We've come up with an aspiration for late this year to have the first all-electric public works crew in California, and we think it should be a tree planting crew. Tree planting is carbon negative. So imagine if we can do that with all zero emissions vehicles. Last week, we rented this Volvo mini excavator that's electric. It's the first one in California. We actually demanded that our rental company, Herc, rent it. Volvo did a demonstration 6 months ago. And you know what my guys said? They said, you can talk to each other while you're using it. Instead of this loud diesel engine going, where they used to use hand signals, and now they can talk. And the people on the residential street where we're planting the trees aren't listening to a diesel engine and breathing in those fumes all day. So we're gonna get like 6 of these Ford F-150 Lightning pickups. We're gonna trailer in the trees from a trailer behind the pickups, a feather-light aluminum trailer, eliminating the mid-sized diesel truck that currently brings the trees. And so hopefully by November, we'll be planting trees in a zero emissions way. We're modernizing the way we do enforcement. We have a group of 40 uniformed investigators. In 2015, they wore street clothes. They drove their own personal vehicles and got reimbursed for mileage. And they had like a yellow pad with a pen. This is how we're doing it now. They're uniformed. They're in a city plug-in hybrid Honda Clarity, and they use a tablet. So this is like bringing a couple different things together. This is digital everywhere and path to zero emissions fleet together. Urban cooling is something I'm super passionate about. I have a whole separate talk about this. We were the first city in California and maybe in the United States to use a solar reflective pavement coating on a public street, which reflects about 35% of the sun's rays, and it makes that pavement about 10 degrees cooler in the summer afternoon. And what that means is at night, when the humans need thermal recharge, we need to cool down. The road isn't radiating heat into your neighborhood right when you need to cool down. The way we designed our cities, we designed them like ovens. We have these black surfaces collecting heat all day and radiating the heat back to us at night. So we made a partnership with NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory to visualize our urban cooling projects from the thermal camera on the International Space Station. And we did a project on a crescent-shaped street called Stephanie Drive in the West Valley neighborhood of Winnetka. And you can see that cool crescent from space. There's no roadmap on this image. The image is just a thermal image of the surface temperature of whatever you're looking at. And we found a cool crescent from above. This slide was from a couple different images that JPL provided to me, and I kind of assembled them into the slide. I call this the $4 million slide because we used this slide to get policymakers to invest $4 million in urban cooling last fiscal year. And we were able to coat 206 city blocks across 7 underserved neighborhoods and plant 2,000 trees in those neighborhoods. We got another 4 million this year, and then 2 members of Congress from Los Angeles got $1 million federal earmarks in the federal budget. So the $4 million slide is now the $10 million slide. So it's really interesting, you know, in public policy and politics, you don't just have to have a good idea, you have to sell it. And this is how we sold it, you know, because people wanted to know, does it work, you know? And this was a really intuitive way to show that it worked. Let me just show you a few examples of the kind of streetscape work that we're doing. This is on Los Angeles Street, right behind City Hall East in front of the Federal Building. There was a plain vanilla, sort of boring bike lane there that wasn't very super safe. And there was an active bus route there. And, you know, it's not good when the bus and the bike keep leapfrogging because you have this continuous conflict. They both end up moving at about the same rate, but they keep getting in front and behind each other. So if you put it in an inboard bus boarding island, the cyclist can just slip by and there isn't an interaction there. So this is like, I like to think that this picture kind of represents what we want to do with complete streets, right? We have like different parts of the street for different users. It's well labeled and colorful. And then I didn't even move this here. I took this picture myself. I waited for the bus to come. And then I noticed that like one of these bike share happened to be parked there. And I was like, this is it, this is perfect. And then my boss was like, yeah, but there's, you know, graffiti on the sign there. And I was like, well, it is what it can't win them all, right? You know, at least it doesn't look like I faked it. So this is one of these many like traffic islands that we have. This is Hoover at Union, a little bit sort of southwest of Staples Center. And we had done a project and it had become kind of a little grim and outdated. When we did the new project with these 2 big shade sails, Councilmember Gil Cedillo said, you know, I don't want you to plant these little 24-inch box trees that are going to take 15 years to produce shade. And he said, I'm willing to put in money for bigger trees. Go find me the biggest trees you can buy. So we sourced 72-inch box trees. That means the size of the root box is 72 inches. We had to bring in a crane to drop these trees in. Instant shade right away. Now all of our projects have the biggest trees that'll fit in the space. That ask became one of our regular practices. And then this is really neat. This is on Cesar Chavez. You know, these slip lanes are very dangerous for pedestrians. You're telling the motorist, make an unsignalized right turn. It's never, ever safe to cross that because the motorist is getting this free pass not to look for anybody else. So we're taking out slip lanes and we're creating public plazas in there. So here we put in, this is our first project with like string lights for nighttime. We have a stormwater infiltration section in here because this is on a hillside. Again, big trees were planted. So, you know, this is how we're implementing our innovation strategy. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff, find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. My Twitter handle is Spotnik. I'm constantly like posting about, you know, what everyone else is doing and what we're doing. And I'm happy to take a few questions.